Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures, the solo actual play podcast where stories are told at the speed of dice. With me, Steve Morrison, your game master and solo player. Now come on, let's grab the dice and see where our story goes. Welcome back to Chapter 17 of Book 1, Meridian. Before we get to the recap and episode, I want to make a small scheduling announcement. Starting this week, I'm going to be shifting to an every other Monday release schedule. I'm entering my busy time at work, and this year has been busier and, because of that, more challenging to carve out time to record and edit. Rather than putting the show on hiatus for the whole summer, I'm going to shift to this every other week schedule until life settles down a little bit. This campaign is taking shape, and I don't want to lose all of that momentum. But I also want to make sure I'm creating something that is fun and engaging while also not burning myself out. So starting this week, I'll be releasing every other week for the foreseeable future. I hope you all are enjoying this campaign and will continue accompanying me on this adventure. And now, last time. Sejana emerges from her meeting with Clementine and contacts Hallow. The inspector is gobsmacked that Sejana would confront Clementine in person, but Sejana wanted to get a sense of the woman. They agree it's a good idea for Sejana to leave the system for a little while, and Hallow is going to keep working leads. Sejana returns to the ship berth and sees Einar and Ayati loading up the ship. They greet her and she meets the new crewman, Ludin. She boards the ship and does some research into the CLF, but she only scratches the surface of what there is to know. She reaches out to a fellow liar, Augustus Romeo Kipling, and his crew aboard the Memphis to apprise them of the potential assassination plan against Gozen Kazuko. Once the Wolf is fully loaded, they depart from Davonshire and enter the Celerity Conduit. Now, because the Wolf is only a jump one ship, it's going to have to jump to the next system, drop out, refuel, jump again, and so on and so forth. But I don't really want to make 14 rolls for the jump and the astrogation checks. So I'm going to let those rolls stand for the entire trip. There's one more roll that I want to make, which is going to be a piloting check for the fuel scooping, because in some of these systems that they're going to stop in, they're going to have to scoop their own unprocessed hydrogen and refine it in the ship's refineries before they can jump to the next system. Ayati has a pilot spacecraft of 3. She needs to hit a 10 plus on this roll for it to go smoothly. Let's see what happens. Well, she got a 7 on the dice, plus 3 is a 10, so it is a 10 exactly, which means it's nothing fancy, but it gets the job done, and they are able to scoop enough of this hydrogen from the gas giant, refine it, and then jump into the Celerity Conduit again, and repeat that process multiple times as they make their way over the next 10 to 11 days towards the Oregota system. They've been aboard the Howlin Wolf, essentially just trapped together for 11 days. We've got one more roll that we should roll, and that is our random encounter roll, because I think it's still a possibility that they might run into trouble. Now, I had this idea to adjust the roll based on how everything else went, but since all of those rolls were successes, I don't really see a need to change the roll. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll 3d6, and this is going to represent basically 3 or 4 days of travel to determine if there is any sort of a counter. If I get a 6 on any of the dice, there will be an encounter. If I get a 6 on more than one die, there will be multiple encounters, and we'll deal with them as they come. So here are the 3d6. I've got 1, 6. So there is 1 encounter. So let's roll our 2d6 and see what that encounter is. 2 and a 5. A mining ship. As the Howlin Wolf drops out of the celerity conduit in the Thras system, Ayati spools up the astrodrive and sets course for the nearest gas giant. The minutes pass as the ship's acceleration increases, sending them hurtling deeper into the system. In less than an hour, they arrive at the gas giant, and Einar enters the bridge, standing beside Ayati's pilot seat. "Scoop ready, Cap," Ayati says.
"Good," he replies. "Bring us in close."
The Howlin Wolf dives toward the gas giant, and the ship begins to buffet against the atmospheric storms. Ayati holds her steady as the fuel scoops drag hydrogen from the atmosphere and funnel it into the tanks. When the indicators read full, Ayati pulls the ship up and out of the gravitational pull.
"Nice work," Einar says. "Take us back to the conduit. Looks like the refinery's already working through what we pulled in."
A chime fills the cockpit, and Ayati swipes at the display. She frowns and says, "I'm picking up a distress call, coming from the 68 Spur asteroid field." Einar looks at it and studies the system map.
"There are some mining bases in this system. Maybe it's coming from one of them. Can you pinpoint it?"
"Looks like a ship, just floating outside 68 Spur." Ayati looks at Einar. "Seems awfully likely to be a trap."
Einar grunts. Agreed. But if it is a genuine call, we might be leaving those poor saps to a cold death."
He reaches over and activates the ship comm.
"Lushale to the bridge, please."
A moment later, Sejana enters the cockpit. "Problem?"
"Maybe,"
Einar says, and explains the situation. "I could take the Harrower and investigate," she says. "If it's a trap, I'll handle it. Give the wolf some space to maneuver away."
"I don't want to ask you to do that," Einar says.
"You don't have to. We finished the mission," she replies, tossing out the ISS motto with practiced confidence. Turning on her heel, Sejana hurries to her quarters, where she pulls out a pilot's jumpsuit and slides it on over her deep skin. Once the suit is sealed, she grabs a helmet and gloves, as well as a go bag from her locker, and turns to head toward the cargo bay. Einar is waiting for her outside her room. She raises an eyebrow and he holds up his hands.
"I'm not here to dissuade you, just to tell you to be careful. If there's trouble, come running back to us."
Sejana looks down at him and shakes her head. "If there's trouble, you burn as hard as you can toward the conduit. If there are pirates over there, they'll likely be faster than the wolf. I'll slow them down as much as I can."
The Haldren grunts. "Should we even be taking this risk? There's no sign of life coming from that ship. It's probably not worth the risk."
Sejana shrugs. "You're the captain. Can you live with not knowing whether there are people who need help over there?" Einar is silent for a few long moments, a battle clearly taking place in his mind. Then he looks up at her helplessly and says,
"I don't know."
"You're a good man, Captain," the liar says. "This is why I said you don't have to ask. I'm on it." She steps past him and heads down into the cargo bay, weaving her way through the packed-in crates to the airlock on the far side of the large room. Entering the airlock, she seals it behind her and slips the helmet over her head and gloves onto her hands. Once the suit is pressurized, she begins the countdown to depressurizing the airlock and opening the hatch. When the airlock opens, Sejana sees the shimmering expanse of the deep beyond the cockpit of her ship. Activating the neural link to the Harrower, Sejana orders the cockpit open, and the canopy retracts. With a quick push-off, she leaves the wolf behind and grabs hold of the rotation bars, guiding herself around to a seated position within the fighter's cockpit. Once settled in, she closes the canopy and begins the startup sequence. Over the comm, Ayati's voice fills her ears. "When you give the word, I'll release the docking clamps." "Good to go," Sejana says, and almost immediately feels a jolt as the docking clamps holding the Harrower to the wolf's side are released. She engages thrusters and pushes the fighter away from the ship before bringing the drive up to military acceleration. "Good luck out there," Ayati says. Sejana doesn't respond as her eyes are focused on the displays as her scanners begin actively sweeping the area. The Harrower only needs a few minutes to cross the distance between ships, and as the fighter closes on the listing mining ship, Sejana tunes the scanners to sweep it. All right. Sejana is aboard her fighter, the Harrower, which is a remnant of her days with the Imperial Special Service. How she came to possess it is a story of its own, but it has fairly powerful sensors. In Traveler parlance, her ship has improved sensors, and they give her a +1 DM to electronics sensors tests. She doesn't have sensors as a specialty, but she does have the electronics skill at a 0 level. Plus, we'll add her intellect of 2, so she'll be rolling with a cumulative +3 on this sensors check. Now, I'm going to set the target number at 8, and the amount of effect that she gets will determine how much info she's able to pull. Here we go. 6 on the dice +3 is a 9, so a success with an effect of 1. What does she detect when scanning this ship? Let's roll on our trusty descriptor and focus tables to find out. So for descriptor, a 63 makeshift, and our focus is 72 ruins, makeshift ruins. Okay, I've got an idea. Sejana scans the ship and detects a superstructure that has been seemingly bolted onto the hull of this mining vessel. It's mostly debris at this point, but a quick analysis indicates that the wreckage matches materials used for creating domed outposts. Not a full-blown dome city, but a smaller structure that could be erected and pressurized on an asteroid or a small moon that would allow miners to get out of their deep skins for a bit. Kind of like camping in space. They aren't normally attached to a ship, so that's a little weird. She also detects more bodies than would normally crew a mining ship like this. There are no life signs, but she can't determine if the damage to the ship and structure are from weapons fire or some sort of malfunction. Calling up the comm, she sends a message back to the Wolf. There are no survivors, and there's something odd about this ship. It's almost like they tried to transport more people than the ship could handle by supplementing the life support with a mining structure. Einar comes over the comms.
Strange, but if there's no one to save, we're not in the salvage business. We'll mark it and be on our way. Get back here.
It's possible the ship was destroyed by weapons fire. I'm going to scan the nearby belt. Sejana pushes the throttle and fires the thrusters, sending the Harrower arcing over the wreckage.
Negative, Einar says. If they were attacked, there's no reason for us to stick around.
Start heading towards the jump point. I'll catch up.
We shall.
Captain, the crew of the Wolf may not be salvagers, but I am a liar, and there might be people who would pay good money to know what happened out here. I can easily catch you even if you get ahead of me. Just don't jump without me. There's a silence on the comm for a minute, then Einar says,
All right, fine. But I expect you to dock with this ship before we reach the jump point. I don't want to spend any more time in this system than I need to.
Understood, she says, pushing the Harrower to a higher acceleration as it races towards the asteroid belt. It's only another few minutes before she's nearing the edges of the field, and she begins deceleration. Bringing the scanners up again, she begins a full sweep of the nearby asteroids. Let's roll that sensors check again at +3. This time, we're going to set the difficulty at 12. Here we go. 4 + 3 is a 7. Well, it's not quite an exceptional failure, but it is pretty close. Sejana scans the asteroid field for almost 30 full minutes, but there's too much interference from the high concentration of heavy metals within the field. It's little wonder these miners are out here. There's a fortune to be had in this field. Satisfied that she's not going to find anything else without doing a thorough sweep of the field itself, she turns the Harrower around and heads back towards the mining vessel. As the harrower closes the distance, she spins the ship and begins using thrusters to bring her fighter in closer to the vessel. If she can get close enough, she might be able to create a quick link with the mining ship's computer, assuming there's any power left, and she can pull crew logs and other information out without having to go EV and board the ship. Hey folks, it's Steve interrupting the episode for a mid-roll ad break. Before we get to that, I did want to mention that I have started a Patreon, so if you want to support the show in a monetary way, you can go over to Patreon and support me over there at Errant Adventures. Now on to the mid-roll ad break.
Are you looking for a D&D podcast with a dark side? Something more like Game of Thrones and less like Monty Python? Tale of the Manticore is part dark fantasy audio drama, part solo D&D RPG. There's no plot armor here. The dice make all the important decisions. Join me as I resurrect the excitement, wonder, and emotion of old school D&D. Made for a mature audience, Tale of the Manticore is both a fiction and a game. It's the story where chaos rolls.
All right, let's start with a pilot check to make sure she can close the distance with this mining vessel without any incidents. There's a decent amount of debris floating around, which will make this a little bit more challenging. So I'm going to say that this is a difficult test, but I think Sejana also isn't rushing in. So she's going to take some extra time and gain a +2 to her check. So she's rolling a cumulative +4 and needs to hit a target number of 10. 6 on the dice, +4 is 10 exactly. She eases the harrower through the debris field surrounding the mining vessel, and it takes her a few minutes to align her cockpit with the access hatch closest to the ship's bridge. Once she's locked the ship into a fixed pattern, she begins scanning for an active quick link. Let's ask the Oracle if there's still enough emergency power for a remote link up. I think it's 50-50. 20. That's a yes. Let's roll the computer check really quick to see if she can download the ship's logs and black box remotely. I think this is a standard feature of any salvage, so I'm going to say it's an average difficulty. She has a +3 in electronics computers, and I think she'll take her time once again. The harrower has a 6 thrust astrodrive compared to the 1 thrust of the Wolf, so she's not really worried about catching up to the ship before it reaches the jump point. Rolling the computer's check at a +5. The higher the effect, the more info is downloaded. Okay, that is a 12 total for an effect of 4. I think that means she downloads the black box and all of the ship's logs. I wonder, are the logs encrypted? It's just a mining ship, so I doubt it. Let's call it unlikely and ask the Oracle again. A 22, that's a yes. I wonder why these logs are encrypted. These miners must have been part of a larger mining consortium. Maybe we could come up with a name for it. Fortunately, I have the Book of Random Tables Science Fiction number 2 by Matt Davids, which has a handy table for corporation names. Let's roll on that and see what we get. 23. All right, so the name I rolled up is Chromatics. Sejana pulls the logs up and frowns at the encryption, locking her out. Civilian mining ships don't usually encrypt their logs unless there are company secrets to hide. A quick search of her database shows the ship is logged with Chromatics Survey and Mining out of the Cassidon system. One of the largest mining concerns in the sector, they acquired mining rights to the system 50 years ago, with operations beginning to dwindle in the last few years. The last record she finds of mining material being transported out of this system was half a year ago. And this mining ship, it seems like it was attacked within the last 5 to 10 hours. Something isn't right here, but without decrypting the logs, there isn't much else to do. By right of salvage, she could return the logs to Chromatics for a finder's fee with first right of refusal on a contract should the company choose to follow up on the attack. If she cracks open the logs, she'll have to purge them from her system before returning to Cassida. or face consequences. She drums her fingers for a moment, debating the options before she shunts the logs into a secure backup, fires up the thrusters, and pushes away from the ship. If someone attacked this ship, they're likely long gone. There's no reason for her to decrypt the logs and lose out on that finder's fee when she was just as likely to receive a contract to hunt down the people who did this anyways. She maneuvers the Harrower away from the debris and begins accelerating away, entering an intercept course for the Howlin Wolf. Her comm chimes and Einar says,
"Anything to report?"
Sejana says, "Nothing definitive, but I pulled the logs in black box and left a salvage claim tag pinned to the distress call. I'll contact the company that owns the ship when we get back to Cassida."
"Understood. I'm glad it didn't turn out to be trouble. I'll see you when you dock."
"Advocate Soral, what should we do?" Crewman Talab asks. The advocate studies the blip moving on the display and frowns. He's under express orders to not reveal his presence in the system. The mining ship stumbling on them had been bad luck, but they had sorted that mistake. Now an unidentified fighter was snooping around the wreckage. If they were discovered, the blessing of the ancients wouldn't be fast enough to catch them. "We can do nothing for now," the advocate finally says. "The asteroids will shield us from their scans." The crew is silent in the face of his command, and Soral returns to studying the blip. It moves to the edge of the belt, and the internal alert registers active scans. There's a collective breath held on the bridge, though Soral is confident in the protection the asteroids provide. Fighter scanner suites aren't nearly powerful or advanced enough to penetrate the massive amount of heavy metals that are in the asteroids around the ship. The moments pass slowly, and eventually the fighter turns away from the belt and returns to the mining ship, maneuvering to a close proximity. "Talab, are you certain there will be no evidence of our attack in their logs?" "Yes, Advocate. We took them completely unawares, and I believe the damage we inflicted will look consistent with a reactor breach." Soral nods, and then breathes a silent sigh of relief when the fighter pulls away from the mining wreckage and tears off in pursuit of its home ship. Turning to Talab, he says, "Resume normal operations and continue clearing the field. The fleet will be arriving soon." The Howlin Wolf drops out of the conduit in the Oregota system 11 days after leaving Cassida. In the cockpit, the crew is seated at their stations. Ayati spools down the Aster drive and rigs it for in-system maneuvers. Already she's setting course for Creus, which is only a short 2 hours from the jump point. Einar studies his display and turns to Ludin sitting beside him. He points at the engineering displays and explains a series of fluctuations in the drive. The new crewman listens intently, nodding along. Sejana is at her own station, sending out queries to the in-system quick for open contracts. Einar told her they would have 2 days on planet, so if she can find something fast and easy, all the better. There's not a lot of traffic in the Oregota system, and what there is consists of small freight haulers like the Wolf. As they draw close to the planet, the shimmering pink is the first thing they notice. "I thought this was a water world," Ayati says. "Shouldn't it be blue?" "The atmosphere is tainted from an algal bloom 100 years ago," Sejana says. "The air is toxic now, which means breathers for all of us. The indigenous people's deep water habitats are still safe, but even they need to wear filters in the shallows. It's a real shame." "What happened?" Ludin asks. "Where did the algae come from?" An Imperial research station was trying to adapt an algae from off-world to help increase production in the fisheries. They didn't expect it to react with an enzyme in the fish's mouth. Almost overnight, the algae began releasing a toxin that reacted to the air, and within 5 years, the whole atmosphere was filled with toxin. Ludin stares at the display, and Sejana looks at him. The universe is full of many such mistakes. All we can do is try to survive and fight on.
Well, there are bubble cities now, Einar interjects, and we'll be landing at the starport in Creusis, the capital city.
He waves a hand across his display and transmits a data packet to all their queues.
The starport has standard restrictions, but Creusis is incredibly strict.
Here he looks at Sejana.
No armor, no weapons.
She nods. I'm only allowed to carry if I'm on an active contract, which I haven't found yet.
I suggest we all stick to the starport as much as possible, Einar says. I'll be trying to find us some cargo for our return journey. New kid, I want you to run diagnostics on all ship systems. Ayati, you keep an eye on the kid's work and plot us a course to the Equilon system. Understood?
The others nod, but Sejano raises an eyebrow. Expecting trouble?
I don't know,
he says, looking back at the display of the blue-pink planet.
What is it you humans say? Expect the worst. Hope for the best. I'm not ordering anyone to stay on the ship when you're off duty, but I wouldn't venture too far out. Now, Ayati, take us in.
Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures. If you enjoyed the show, please spread the word. And if you want to support the show directly, leave me a review or support me on Patreon at patreon.com/errantadventures. You can also buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com/errantadventures. If you want to interact with me, my handle on all the socials is @errantsolopod, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post short fiction and campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the deep, liars.